So this week I learned that William of Orange's favourite drink was cock ale.
Ta-da!
You'd be forgiven for thinking that my desire to recreate cock ale was just due to my long-standing desire to say the word cock on the internet. But it actually comes from my interest in a 17th century man called Sir Kenelm Digby. Sir Kenelm Digby gave us the first ever recipe for cock ale, which was William of Orange's favourite drink. And I'm very excited because joining me today is Sir Kenelm Digby's descendant, Edmund Digby-Jones.
Hello. Nepotism works.
You are what generation of Nepo baby then in this instance?
At 400 years, it's hard to put a mathematical number on it.
So the plan is we're going to make a cock ale, learn a little bit about the knight who made it and the prince that drank it. I cannot believe that my life has amounted to this.
I always wanted to be on Blue Peter.
This all comes from Sir Kenelm Digby, who wrote, "These are tame days when we have forgotten how to make a cock ale." The whole point of this is to try and find out, is this something that we have really suffered in not remembering throughout the ages? The reason why we're doing this is because William of Orange...
King William III.
King William III latterly in the UK, but he was originally the head of state for the Dutch Republic.
Yes. William III was invited by the English Parliament to invade and depose the English King James II, who nobody liked.
It sounds like a very British invasion.
It's a very... and Dutch, actually.
Which leads us all back to the cock. So we're going to start with Kenelm Digby's recipe for cock ale, which starts, take 8 gallons of ale, which we're immediately not going to do because I don't actually drink ale. Do you drink ale?
No, I don't actually
No.
drink ale.
So we're not going to do 8 gallons. So the ironic thing is that we are here to make cock ale.
Yeah.
And this is where I realised I actually have this as a bottle opener.
Did you buy that or your wife?
My wife did.
Right.
We're cutting down the recipe by a 12th.
So 12 of these. I love history.
When making cock ale, I think it's really, really vital that you have a nice frothy head on it. How do you describe Sir Kenelm Digby? Philosopher, scientist, privateer, spy, diplomat?
Yeah, he did a lot of things, and he did them spectacularly. Quite a lot of them do also end in a certain level of... Like, his privateering career goes really well. Like, he does genuinely get some Spanish ships. But as I recall, he is eventually told to stop because he's really narking the Spanish Navy, and actually this is getting a bit much.
And his book is really interesting to read through because it's somewhere between cookery book and medical guide, essentially. So the cock ale recipe is sandwiched between a recipe for buttered eggs and cream and 2 recipes for plague water.
He is meant to have been pretty sure that one cure for the plague was sticking a stuffed crocodile under your bed. If you're rich enough at that point to afford a stuffed crocodile, you probably can board up your house and wait out a plague.
Some of my favourite facts about Sir Kenelm Digby that I've come across. He was said to have invented a new way of bottling wine.
He's credited as the inventor of the wine bottle.
One of my favourite things though, he actually had a brilliant invention for the kitchen. So at this point, timekeeping in kitchens was non-existent and most kitchen servants were illiterate, so there wasn't really any system of timekeeping in kitchens. And what Kenelm Digby did was invent a really brilliant scheme for keeping time, which was reciting psalms. So if you had a pot of tea that you wanted to steep for 3 minutes, he would recite Psalm 40, which takes you in 2.5, 3 minutes. If you wanted to blanch some lampreys in a pan of boiling water, he'd recite Ave Maria, and that would apparently last him about 12 seconds or however long you needed to boil lampreys for. He apparently once agreed to a duel in a disagreement over which was better between French and British wine. I think what we're learning is that your ancestor was just very easily distracted.
What?
So I've read that Kenelm's father, Everard, was one of the conspirators behind the gunpowder plot.
Yeah, he put in quite a lot of the money, and I think he rented the house they were going to use the HQ for the uprising afterwards. He was one of the plotters. Yeah, he was hung, drawn and quartered.
So we have our stand-in for the 8 gallons of ale he asks for. He tells you to take a cock and boil it. So I've not boiled this, but I poached it for about an hour, hour and a half, so fingers crossed it's tender, because you really want your cock to be tender when you're plunging it into ale. I would have loved to have seen how long the psalm would have been to cook that for an hour and a half. He tells you to then take 4 pounds of raisins of the sun well stoned, 2 or 3 nutmegs, 3 or 4 flakes of mace, and half a pound of dates. One of the things I found really interesting about Kenelm's book was that he's actually one of the first writers of the period who uses specific volumes for spices. A lot of the time at this point, they presume a certain degree of knowledge, and so they don't tell you what to do. They'll kind of sometimes say with particular spices, use this many because they were the most valuable thing in the house. And it's kind of like the equivalent of truffles. Now you're like, don't waste this, don't be profligate with a nutmeg. I don't have a mortar and pestle big enough to do all this, so I'm just gonna use the classic technique of the end of a rolling pin. It smells kind of like Christmas, actually.
It's very Christmas, you're dead right.
A fairly decent little sort of mulch now. to our beaten mixture, it tells us there are 2 quarts of sack. We don't have sack because we've got sherry, the nearest equivalent we can find these days.
Because you're lazy and didn't raid Spain.
No, this is very true. I wasn't like your ancestors.
Just saying.
I'm just gonna eyeball this. I would say that's about a pint. Now we need to put these in our ale mixture. Nice little spit.
Can you imagine Kenelm like being halfway through and going, right, I know what it looks like, but run with me. What if we put a cock in it?
I'm gonna deskin the cock because I don't really want flabby bits of cock floating around in our...
Well, you know more about deskinning a cock than I do, so over to you.
Now we've combined all these, he tells you to stop it, close it for 6 or 7 days, then bottle it, and then after a month you may drink it. I'm not going to do that for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I'm impatient. Secondly, I really don't want to die of salmonella. I reckon let's try it now. I don't know if I should sieve this or not. I think that we should. I think I'm just going to try and take a layer off the top. I'll dish us up a couple of glasses. I'm quite curious, what are your favourite stories from your ancestor?
Well, the one that we in the family are particularly attached to, which as I watch this liquid being spooned out is really coming to my mind, is that in his capacity as magician and scientist, he was very keen to discover the elixir of life, universal medicine. We think that he thought he found it, and he gave it to his wife, because he's not a complete idiot, and obviously she died. And it's known that like she did die and it was really sketchy. What we like to think though is that maybe he was going in the right direction, because she's really well preserved when she died. So maybe he did crack embalming fluid.
I think it's probably safe to say that you and I have drunk quite a lot of strange things in our time knowing each other. I think this might take the prize. I present to you, sir, an authentic cock ale brewed on the instruction of your ancestor.
To Sir Kenelm. That's not bad.
Nice, that's pretty decent.
It's really tasty.
I actually prefer that to the ale. It is swampy and I really do want to pass it through a sieve. It is giving me Christmas vibes to this. I would genuinely sort of have this as an alternative to mulled cider at Christmas. I'm genuinely going to strain this afterwards and continue to drink it.
Well, yeah, I'm going to stay while you do.
Cheers. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching me drink cock ale, or if there's anything else you'd like to see me eat or drink from history, then let me know in the comments.